Rising up the middle. He's in! Utah leads. Daniels for the win. Caught. It's gone. LSU does it. Mason Taylor.
Hey everybody, welcome into the show. We got the Washington State Cougars here. As you can see, the thumbnail's up there because I forgot to take it down, but that's okay. I had to pull up the actual roster here for me to be able to read off of. But Washington State's going to be an interesting team. I'm going to really like doing this video. Of course, you can check out this tag right here, Bash's CFB Show on TikTok. It's the same thing as the YouTube that you are watching it on. So check that out for the shorter versions, but I'm also going to be making a bunch of other short videos and a lot more reactions to specific games live as they happen on Saturdays. So make sure you like and subscribe. And also check out the playlist up here. Pointing to the wrong corner again. I'm notorious for doing that. Right here, this playlist gives you all the previews that I have done so far. Today, we're going to talk about the Washington State Cougars. Now, we're going to start with talking about what they lost from their 2022 season, which was a 7-6 campaign with the first full year of Jake Dickert as the head football coach at Washington State, a more defensive-minded guy, a little bit of a different style than what Wazoo has had the last couple of tenures that have been there, going back to Mike Leach and definitely different than Nick Rolovich before him. Deion Henley is the only key departure that I want to mention as far as NFL draft or next level. He was a really good linebacker last year, definitely their best defensive player by far. And we're going to see who all steps up, and we'll talk about some of those names coming back. And they're going to be scrolling here as I put up the banner for that on the bottom line there. So you can see the stats right now ticking down below as I am talking about this team. But Deion Henley, a guy leaving for the NFL draft. I can't remember what round he was drafted in, but he definitely fell a little bit farther than I thought he would. With that being said, he's out. Great player. Now we're going to talk about the transfers, and transferring out is what we are going to talk about first. The guys leaving the program. Xavier Ward, quarterback, going to Sam Houston. Then you got four wide receivers that are leaving, and it starts with Dizon Stribling. He was a really good player for this team last year, one of the better receivers, and he surprisingly left. He's going out to Oklahoma State and Stillwater. Donovan Ollie going out to Colorado. Nope, it says UC, so that has to be Cincinnati. And then Reed Shumpert going out to Cal Poly, and then finally Anderson Grover, a wide receiver, going out to Sacramento State. Now, again, Stribling probably the only impactful transfer out of that wide receiver room. They did lose a good handful of guys that they had on the roster, but Stribling definitely the big loss, and those other three guys more of depth pieces, not necessarily players that made an impact last year. They only lost one offensive lineman, though, and that was Jarrett Kingston, the interior offensive lineman, to USC. Now, defensively is what I want to talk about here, because transferring out for this team, you got to start with talking about Amir Crowder going out to Tarleton just to get the defensive line out of the way. Same with edge rusher Gabriel Lopez going to Stony Brook. Again, opposite side of the country right there. That's kind of a weird fit. So two defensive linemen, not big impact leaves. I love their defensive line personally coming back this year. But this is one that really hurt. Linebacker Francisco Mauigoa going out to Miami, a really good player, definitely linebacker too to Deion Henley. So you're losing your two best linebackers for sure off of the team onto wherever they are heading next for Deion Henley out to the NFL. For, of course, Francisco Mauigoa off to Miami, where I believe his brother is Francis Mauigoa, I think is his name. Linebacker Isaiah Paul off to UCF, as well as Travion Brown off to Arizona State as a linebacker. And then finally, linebacker Gavin Barthiel going out to Utah State. In the secondary, did they lose impact transfers? The answer is no, but they lost a handful. Two cornerbacks leaving. Armani Archie is the first one to talk about, going to UConn, and then Caleb Ford Dement going out to Texas State. Now, you lost two safeties as well, with Bryce Grays going to UTSA, and then Adrian Shepard going to Stephen F. Austin. All right. So that's some bad news, especially when you talk about Stribling and Francisco Malagoa leaving the program, two really good players that were going to make an impact on this team this upcoming year if they would have stayed. Now, what receivers are they bringing in? What linebackers are they bringing in to help with those two holes that are going to be left? Starting with the wide receiver position, Isaiah Hamilton is a guy from San Jose State who has played decent in the past, definitely a good depth piece. The two big impact transfers that they got at wide receiver were Kyle Williams from UNLV and Josh Kelly from Fresno State. I'm curious to see how they fit here. I'm a little bit concerned that this pass game won't be as dynamic as it was last year, but you do have a great quarterback coming back in Cam Ward, and that's a big deal to me. Offensive tackle Christy Nkanu is coming in from Southern Utah. Defensive lineman Naeem Rodman coming in from Colorado. Then you brought in 3 linebackers to help cover for the 4 that you lost. Ahmad McCullough, I kind of said that weird. Ahmad McCullough coming in from Maryland, and it's Devin Richardson from Texas to help fill the void that you have at linebacker there, and then Devon Hicks from USF. Secondary, they picked up 1 player. His name is Dominic Tatum coming in from Utah State. A couple of guys I want to watch out for breaking out. Jalen Jackson was running back number 2. I feel like they're going to rely on the run game maybe a little bit more this upcoming year. So I think that Nakia Watson, who was a guy that definitely played a good bit for them, is going to do very well, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jalen Jenkins and Nakia Watson are both able to go over 500 yards, and a lot more people maybe watching the Pac-12 a little bit more because of all the firepower that's out there with Washington State being a sleeper team in this conference. Jalen Jenkins, the true sophomore, who as a true freshman ran for over 300 yards, had some good backup reps, and you saw his name in that bottom line ticker. He could be a guy that definitely takes a second-year leap. The other breakout player I want to bring up is DT Sheffield. DT Sheffield, a JUCO player coming in from Northwest Mississippi Community College, and they play great JUCO ball down there in the Southeast. We saw the last chance U run that they had at East Mississippi, and even before that with Chad Kelly going there, and they've had a lot of really good players come through that region. And, you know, North Mississippi Community College, they were part of it. So DT Sheffield, a slot receiver, going to be a fun guy to watch out for on this team. All right, so Cam Ward coming back for this offense as we preview this roster. Cam Ward, huge that he's coming back for yet another year. The former transfer from Incarnate Word made a huge splash at the FCS level with Incarnate Word. He was very efficient last year. You can see his stat line on the bottom, 23 touchdowns, 9 picks last year. He's hoping to improve on that number, but that's still a pretty good number. Nakia Watson, Jalen Jenkins, their 2 top rushers, also back. Nakia Watson, one of the better running backs in the Pac-12, and he's somebody nobody talks about. Again, brand new receivers all across the board. Once we jump over to this wide receiver position, Kyle Williams, Josh Kelly, the transfers from the Mountain West, another transfer from the Mountain West, Isaiah Hamilton, and I told you about DT Sheffield. But a guy to also watch out for is Leighton Smithson, who's the leading returning receiver off of this roster last year. He's a guy that could definitely make a huge impact for this team. Same with, I think it's Sion Nunnally. Tsion. I think it's Sion Nunnally, but he's the guy that didn't get a ton of run last year. But if you take a look at what Nunnally was able to do, and it's kind of similar to what, Leighton Smithson was able to do. He came in for short times. He didn't really play a ton last year. He only had a handful of snaps. He still was able to get a handful of receptions last year. So he's a guy that could definitely take a jump here as he is in his 3rd year in this program. Taking a look at the tight end position just real quick, Billy Revere is the guy that you are probably going to look at as the starter. Is there a ton of experience there with him? Not really. 12 receptions, 117 yards last year. Definitely a guy that's going to have to prove it on the field. And definitely a little bit of a concern is that tight end position. We'll see how that all works out, especially in the run game right there. Now, as we talk about this offensive line, the interior of the offensive line, I really do like Connor Gomnes is a guy that's coming in as a returning starter at center. You brought in Christy Nkanu, pardon me, who comes in from Southern Utah as a former starter. Definitely a really good player, a diamond in the rough type of player that's going to likely be a starter. And if he's not ready, you have Mayaki Fifita as the backup there at guard. He's really good and experienced in this system. And then Christian Hilborn is a talented player at that left side guard position. Essa Pohl is definitely going to be one of the starting tackles, and the other one is probably going to be Fa'alili. I think it's Fa'alili or something like that. Fa'amo. He's going to be probably the starter on the other side, but Luke Roten is going to try to push for that job. Zach Miller might try to push for some playing time there, but Fa'amo is probably going to be the starter at the other tackle position. Tackle is a little bit concerning for me. I hope Cam Ward is not on his back a ton, but that could definitely happen with the concern at the offensive line position. So overall, this offense has a good bit of questions. They have some sort of potential, and if that interior is strong, if their run game can be just take a little bit of a step forward, that takes a lot of pressure off of Cameron Ward and these new receivers to make an impact. All right, talking about the defense here. Now, I really like the edge rusher, Brennan Jackson. He's a really, really good player. If you saw his stat line down on the bottom line ticker, I don't need to really highlight it too much other than to tell you the fact about he had 12 tackles for loss. He had 6 sacks last year. He's played in pass coverage. He forced a fumble last year. He is a really, really good player, and he's definitely a guy that can maybe make up for some inexperience or not even inexperience if Ahmad McCullough and Devin Richardson are going to be the starters at linebacker, but you can make up for maybe the lack of skill that might be there at the linebacker position, especially early as they develop. David Gusta is back as well. He was a redshirt freshman last year who got a little bit of run. Overall, this defensive line, it's going to be a decent one. I really like the pass rush ability that they have from Jackson. Ron Stone's not a bad player too, and he's very experienced. And you see Milani probably going to be the other interior guy. I like the front four that Washington State has. The linebacker core, I'm not so sure about. Now, again, Ahmad McCullough, Devin Richardson, they're likely going to be the starters of 2 transfers from a little bit bigger of programs. I guess Maryland's probably on the same footing, but certainly a more talented player in Devin Richardson coming in from Texas there. Kyle Thornton is another guy that was looking to try to play for some or really battle for some playing time here this year. He had 36 total tackles last year. Ron Stone, another guy to really watch for. Ron Stone, I don't know what I'm saying there. Ron Stone's an edge rusher. He's not a linebacker. But regardless, they have a lot of youth at that position, at the linebacker position, below those top 3, Thornton and then McCullough and Richardson. They do have a transfer that they brought in a couple of years ago in Joshua Erling, but I don't think he's really going to play a ton. He's not that talented. No offense to him. He's just being able to crack the rotation on a Power 5 roster is pretty tough. And Joshua Erling, a kid who came in from, I think, like a D2 school that I don't even know. George Fox. That's the school he came from. That's all I have to tell you right there. Props to him for being on this roster, though. Then you look at the secondary, and I really like this secondary. You start by talking about Shao Smith-Wade. He's a really, really good player, and you're going to look at that other cornerback spot with Cam Lampkin as an experienced player to start out there. And then the safety position is very good. Sam Lockett, going to be a really good player, experienced player as well in the secondary, coming in here to really try to make an impact there. But Jaden Hicks is that other safety who's the headliner. He was a really good player, probably their second best defensive player coming back besides Brennan Jackson. He's a really good player. So if you combine what you have at corner and safety, and then you look at a good nickel back in Kapena Gushiken, this is going to be a really good secondary and something that is very good and very fitting for the Pac-12 with how many quarterbacks and great receivers that they have, especially looking at in-state rival Washington. All right. Taking just a quick glance at special teams, Nick Haberer is going to be the punter. Dean Janikowski is going to be the place kicker, while Colton Thieker is likely going to be the kickoff specialist. Janikowski might be that guy. Over-under win total is going to be 6 wins, so let's run through this schedule real quick. But again, is 6 wins achievable for the Washington State Cougars? It absolutely is. Just a little bit of a spoiler right there. I think this Washington State team has some talent. They might have some holes on offense, but I think with an experienced quarterback, a couple of really good running backs, and a couple of guys at wide receiver who have potential, I think this offense should definitely be fine, and they should be able to give teams a game on that side of the ball. And this secondary is going to give teams fits in the Pac-12. So we're going to talk about how much of fits they are going to give teams in the Pac-12. Let's start with the Colorado State Rams on the road in Fort Collins. Week 1 should not have a problem here. Jay Norvell, I feel like he's trying to turn over this new leaf here with the Colorado State Rams, but at the end of the day, this was a little bit of a rebuild project when he took it and left Nevada. I don't think they're going to be able to compete in this game. Wisconsin at home. They shocked the Wisconsin Badgers last year, went into Camp Randall and beat them. I believe the score was 24-17, if I remember correctly. Now the Badgers have to travel to Martin Stadium in Pullman, Washington. The travel logistics are very difficult. It's right on the border of Washington and Idaho, in the middle of nowhere. You got to fly into some airport, don't know which one, but you got to drive 2.5 hours. Wisconsin's not used to that. Wisconsin's used to inner or in city airports being able to land wherever they're playing. If they're going to Columbus, Ohio, they can land in Columbus, Ohio. If they're going to Lincoln, Nebraska, they can land in Lincoln, Nebraska. They're not landing in Pullman, Washington. They're not going to be used to this type of trip. Washington State beat them last year. If Tanner Mordecai is asked to throw the ball a little bit more than Wisconsin had in the past, this secondary is set up to cover this Wisconsin wide receiver group. I have Washington State beating Wisconsin, pulling off an upset for a second straight year, and I'm a lot more confident in this happening than I would have been last year. In fact, I definitely did not see it coming last year. I'm going to see Washington State beating them for a second straight year in this home-and-home series. Northern Colorado should not be a problem, and this is going to be an awesome game. I could maybe see Washington State, after beating Wisconsin, being ranked here, maybe in the low 20 or in the mid-20s, of course, but in the low parts of the rankings in the top 25 against an Oregon State team who very well also could be in the top 15. And they're coming into town. They're coming to Pullman. However, that whole entire talk about Wisconsin and the travel to Pullman, less of a factor for a team in the Pacific Northwest as well. This is a tough team that likes to run the ball, which doesn't necessarily fit what Washington State loves to hang their hat on defense, which is their secondary right now and their good pass rush ability. I think this is a bad matchup. I'm going with the Oregon State Beavers to go into Pullman and win that game. Off the bye, they're going to UCLA. This is not a tough environment. I do think UCLA is the more talented team, though, and UCLA is also off a bye, so that bye week being early with UCLA also being off a bye, I think that gives Chip Kelly plenty of time to be able to dice up this secondary. I would not be surprised if this goes the other way in favor of Washington State, but we saw Washington go in there last year, and they kind of struggled to stop UCLA on a Friday night, and this could be a similar game, in my opinion. I think UCLA wins, knocking Washington State to 3-2 before playing their former quarterback in Jaden DeLora, a guy that was there under Rolovich that back in 2021 had a really good 22 year. I think he's going to have a really good 23 year, but the secondary is going to give him a little bit of problems, and I think that Arizona defense is not great, and I think this is where Washington State's offense could have their most success against a Power 5 opponent thus far. I have Washington State being able to hold off and win against Arizona in a fun game for sure. That's going to be one I circle on that October 14th date. At Oregon should be another fun game with Washington State. Again, that secondary going up against Bo Nix. But I love the toughness that Oregon brings to the table, and I do not think that Washington State's offense, even if they gain some confidence against Arizona, will be able to keep up with the Oregon Ducks in Autzen Stadium. I have a loss right there before going out to Tempe, and that's a tough back-to-back road trip, having to go to the desert. I'm not necessarily saying that Arizona State's going to be a great team. That preview's coming down the line, but I do think Arizona State is going to be a more talented team than a lot of people give credit for. I think Arizona State pulls off maybe an upset kind of. It might be a short underdog at home. I think Arizona State wins that game. You turn around, you play Stanford. Everybody knows my thoughts on Stanford. They are one of the worst teams in the Power Five. I like the hire of Troy Taylor, but I think it's going to take some time for him to completely flip that roster to become what he needs it to be. He had a lot of success at Sacramento State. He was able to recruit a high four-star in Elijah Brown out to Stanford. And he talked about that Stanford education and all that. But the bottom line is this: Elijah Brown is a really, really good player, and that could be a potential game changer for the future of Troy Taylor. This is not it, though. This is not the year. I have Washington State winning, improving to 5-4. So this is turning out to be a similar year to last year. Let's talk about at Cal. Do they lose to an experienced team? If I was more confident in the California quarterback position, I would be a lot more confident that they would be able to, with an experienced team, go bowling and be able to win a game like this. But I'm not going to take it, especially with the strength of the secondary and the wide receivers maybe coming along. That defense for Cal, it's going to be tough under Justin Wilcox, but I think that Washington State makes enough plays to go on the road and beat the Cal Golden Bears. All right, Colorado, Deion Sanders. You guys, I already did a Colorado preview, and this was a game I had them dropping. So this is a third straight win, 7-4 going into the Apple Cup here. I already have said so many things about this Colorado team, and I've already told you what I think Washington State brings to the table. The only thing I can tell you that is, if you thought Washington State was going to run the air raid and you get to late November and you watch this Colorado versus Washington State game because it's on a Friday night and it's in Pullman, where, again, the travel complications, you're going to see a Washington State team pound the ball down Colorado's throat because Colorado does not have that front seven strength and ability quite yet, at least under Deion. And that's why this 10:30 at night on a Friday night in Pullman is not going to go Colorado's way. And then finally, you have the Apple Cup, which is back on a Saturday. If I remember correctly, it was usually on Black Friday, or at least it had been with Gardner Minshew there with Mike Leach's teams. I'm going to go with Washington, but this is a really tough matchup for Washington because of how good that secondary is. I think this is definitely the best receiver core that Washington State will face all year. I don't really think it's particularly close, though. This is going to be a massive challenge, and I'm so excited to see that type of challenge. I think it will be a really good game, but I think the Washington Huskies win that game. So I talked about this being a potential similar year for Washington State. This one is going to be a 7-5 season yet again, 4-5 in conference play. Let me know down below what you think the Washington State Cougars are going to be able to do in 2023, and then comment down below a team that you want me to do. If I had to take the over-under of 6 wins, I'm pretty confidently taking the over right here, at the very least expecting a push with them getting bowl eligible. I'm pretty confident in that. I think Washington State is a really good team this year. I don't think that they're going to do anything super special, but hey, we've seen crazier. And if Washington State is that sleeper team that can push for a Pac-12 championship, don't be surprised by it. They're a pretty solid team with a fantastic secondary and a solid defense. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys at the next video. Have a good one.